Today, I'm talking with Chris Tottman. Chris is general partner at Notion VC, and previously he's been a co-founder and CCO of MessageLabs, which sold to Semantic for $700 million, a little bit more than a decade ago. So it's safe to say that he's a pretty remarkable guy. What I'm going to talk with him today is how weak or weakening product market fit is affecting your whole go-to-market organization through any stage, and what the downsides are of taking on venture capital for CROs, VP sales, VP marketing, etc. Please enjoy.
There's this kind of what we call this kind of delusional force field that we have, that we believe what we believe. And it's important that we need to believe what we believe in order to lean forward and go in, as the founder is taking extraordinary risk. But the reality is, from a VC, so staying on the venture track, which is growth driven, let's say it's 1% of all of the VC deals that get done. So let's say there's 100% of companies, not all 100% are pitching for VC type money or trading their equity for working capital. But let's say 10% of those that are pitching get VC money. There's only going to be a tenth of those, 1%, that actually stay, broadly speaking, on the venture case.
Chris, nice to have you on the podcast.
I'm excited to be here. It's like home turf. I'm talking to you and go-to-market leaders, which is like my beginning.
I mean, I think I told you this, that you are the first actual venture capitalist on this podcast. We're like over 200 episodes in. We've always avoided you guys.
Wow.
And you girls, and only focused on the go-to-market folks. And people that are listening is like, what is Chris possibly going to be able to tell me today? Wait, the difference is Chris has not only been, GP at Notion.vc, which is like a very much leading European firm, right? I'm not sure kind of how big you guys are actually in the US too, but in Europe, like you a really big name. But also you sold a pretty big business, 10, 15 years ago, 20 years ago?
We right in the middle of the global financial crisis, so end of 2008. And yeah, it was an interesting time. You sell a business and you finally make a truckload of money, and then you don't know which bank to put the money in.
You know what? Those problems, like every listener is sharing those problems. So we can all totally relate, Chris. I think that's great. But I think what's important here, your role there was very commercial, right? Kind of was a very commercial role. So basically, this is your school, and from there then, did a bunch of other things. And one of the other things that you did, you wrote a book, right? You wrote the go-to-market handbook for B2B SaaS leaders. I mean, how more on the nose could it be for the audience here right now? So all of these things basically triggered I gotta talk to Chris. I gotta have him on the show, and here we are today.
Well, I'm so pleased that you invited me, and I think the podcast is just exceptional. My home turf is salespeople. I mean, I just love salespeople. You meet those people that they're trying to orient around a product, and they've got this target, and they've got to either follow the process that's given to them or define a new process that works for them, and they've got to deliver a defined outcome within a specific period of time, and it's highly meritocratic. All your numbers are published. It's just you're just a remarkable group of people. So I feel like so much kinship for the sales folks.
There you go. And that almost leads me to my first thing, right? So when you look at people running VC businesses, they're always writing all of these, industry benchmarks. They're writing kind of the, blitz scaling and the founder playbook and kind of all of those things that an audience of founders would be really interested in. But you wrote the GTM handbook for B2B sales SaaS leaders, right? Kind of what brought you to write that instead of saying, founders on the front?
It took a while. The two co-authors were my original co-founders from when I was 25 years old. We'd acquired one of their businesses, and so they were in the MessageLabs and Star business that we then subsequently sold. We spent, over a 30-year career, I probably spent 20 years working with them directly or indirectly. And they wanted to get the band back together. And in that time, I'm seeing thousands of decks per year. And there's a big difference between a normal company and a venture speed company. And what you're doing is you're seeing the same mistakes over and over again. There are some universal problems that exist that founders are having to kind of address, like an engineer hiring the first sales leader. It's something that they do statistically very poorly. It takes 2 or 3 goes before he was really good in the interview, but ends up being a terrible sales leader for that particular opportunity. Or, understanding who the ICP or the beachhead customers are and being really disciplined about who you don't go to market to, or as we say, why are you acquiring tomorrow's churn? So there are all of these normal things. And let's be frank, most decks at the beginning and almost at the end, 99% are terrible. So we decided to create a book which is really around each chapter is a workbook that enables a founder or an exec to sort of think, this is the problem that I think I've got for my business. And then they can go through that workbook themselves. And that could be about pricing. It could be about ICPs, the segmentation. It could be about messaging. It could be about hiring the first seller. So that's what we did. Richard is an incredible writer. So I'm dyslexic. He's like, he definitely is putting in most of the writing work. And then we got other experts to kind of contribute in certain ways. So it was just a really great thing that you're going to do with like 2 of your closest friends. And you're going to put this out because it's the lowest form of value add, right? It's so consumable. Yeah. I often say I read books with other people. So if I want to go through a transformation process with one of my founders, I will go get us all a book and we'll all read it together in wherever we are in the world, and we'll have a WhatsApp channel which is just about that book, and it's a way of accelerating learning and a way of making business decisions. So we were inspired by those kind of processes, and we launched it nearly 2 years ago, and it's been a hell of a lot of fun.
I wanna tap on something you kind of said there. It was really interesting. The when you have what a change crisis, what did you call it?
Well, there's lots of different we like success crises. We've got so many leads, we haven't got enough salespeople, right? I love those.
Yeah.
And then you get survival events, right? Which is like, oh my God, the infrastructure's not working, and no one's like in MessageLabs, we couldn't deliver email, and we're an email security business, right? So that was super tough. So, but I'm not sure which crisis you're referring to.
No, my point is actually your way of resolving it. So I've never heard this reading a group together. Obviously, I read books with colleagues like Good to Great, and a couple of those books was like, oh, let's have a book club around it almost. But for you, it sounded way more intentional. Like, hey, we have this problem, read this book, and now let's reflect together. Can you just kind of shortly talk a little bit more about that?
I'll give you a specific example that I do with almost every single company that I invest in, which is one of my favorite books. I'll give it a plug. I love it. It's called Play Bigger, which is about category creation. Many people on the call will know this book, and this is all around the way that you can completely reimagine the category that you're in and the infrastructure that you would need to build in order to create more power, both in terms of marketing and positioning, but also the infrastructure power that enables you to start to kind of control or have be the price giver rather than the price taker. So there's a moment in time where you're with a founder and you kind of realize this is the time, because this can actually sort of blow their head off a little bit, right? Because the book will infer to them that their business needs to be bigger than it actually is in imagination. So you have to be kind of careful. So I will say, listen, I'm going to get you this book. There can't be many people on this WhatsApp channel. We're going to read it together, and we're going to start firing inputs and outputs, and we're going to say, hey, but maybe we should be this, or maybe we should be positioned like that. But maybe if we do that, then we need to do this adjacent product that we don't do today, and stuff like that. And so not only are you learning from reading the book, the other people are learning and upgrading, if you like, from the book. But because a bit like elite education, in elite education, everybody is intellectually ambitious, so they fire off each other, and so the learning gets amplified. So I'm just using something that really comes from elite education to the working environment, and it's $60 for 3 books. It's a WhatsApp channel which is like free pretty much, and the inspiration that comes through and the way that you can work on a business is, you just go through a highly accelerated process of both learning and also how you're going to adjust the business. So
I think this is something for people to take away. Maybe it's a little bit disconnected from the core here, but I think there's a really cool way of doing it. Speaking about books, I mean, I had the chance to use a custom ChatGPT to basically query into the GTM handbook. I'm not sure if this is a thing that you give out to anyone. I'm not sure. But, I asked a bunch of questions, but since I have you here, I mean, what would be from your perspective, kind of, what are the three recurring biggest mistakes that, founders and SaaS executives kind of run into all the time on the go-to-market side that you're kind of trying to address with this book?
If we think about the thing that I mentioned earlier about signing tomorrow's churn, you look at like what's going on behind the mind of an investor when you're pitching to them, right? Who, yes, they don't know your business. They might not know your sector. They have all this pattern recognition, which can be good or bad, right? And the pitch will say, yeah, we are X for Y. Let's say that's SME. You go, okay, great. That's X for, Y SME. And then, from experience that what do you mean by SME? So what's the segmentation? Who's specifically SME? We know, of course, that all SMEs and companies of different size are, have different buyers. They have different conditions to buy. We know that they want to buy technology through different channels. We know that there's vertical nuance. There's a whole bunch of stuff. So what happens is you get this kind of generalized positioning. And there's very little granularity that exists around very, very specifically. You really haven't done the customer research, or maybe you have, but you're not articulating it. So we think that, the obsession around that is pretty low level in most of the decks that we receive. And then they'll say, yeah, but we're also great for the enterprise. And you're immediately thinking, these guys don't get it. We could be wrong, and we're wrong most of the time, by the way. So I think really having this insight edge into the customer and the problem that you're solving sets founders apart. That thing. What is the edge? What is the insight edge that they have? And then how are they then able to articulate that if we're talking about pitching, or how does that inform them in terms of the way that they run the company, that they acquire resources, that they focus their roadmap. So there's that obsession around the problem, and there's being very, very granular. So don't think. And then the next one is like, they'll talk about the TAM, which obviously investors need to understand that there's a big vision and a large market to go after. But when you're deploying your resources, when you have limited resources, you're the new small vicious animal that's entered the jungle, right? And you've got to go after something quite specific. So you've got your TAM and SAM and SOM, but inside the SOM, you've got your beachhead. Like, who are the first 10, 15, 20 customers that are going to buy this thing? And what are the similarities? How are they the same? Is that then a packaged up, small cohort of prospects and customers, and then you're going to expand from there. So these kind of things are related. And, 99% of the pitches that we get, founders that are struggling to find product market fit, these are the problems that they have. Also, by the way, when they get product market fit, we know all the sales leaders on the call will know this. Once you get product market fit, every prospect is a now when you have a hammer, right? And what happens is all of a sudden you forget the fact that actually prospects and markets tend to sort of like aggregate together. So, how US companies in your sector in the UK buy is very different from the way that your UK prospects buy. And so you have to constantly be curious at the front end, like who in the company is spending most of their time with customers and prospects, not selling, not pitching, not evangelizing. What they're doing is they're in discovery mode. They're asking questions. They're listening to customers. They're thinking about pain. They're worried about what's this person when they're at sleep at night thinking, if I don't solve this, I'm going to get fired. Those are the problems that you need to, if you like, mine out of your customer base, out of your prospect base. And it's almost like I kind of want like a VP of product market fit, right? Which lasts forever. So I think there's a number. I mentioned one earlier. One of the workbooks that like is worth the most value is if every engineer hired the right sales leader the first time, that's going to be great for the sales leader and great for the company, and trust me, great for the investor. But the amount of times they're on their third sales leader, and you're like, oh my god, why did you hire this one rather than the one that the board were recommending? Well, I kind of like this one. He was really good in the interview. Of course he's good in the interview. It's a sales guy.
The thing is, right? And so to a degree, it's a little bit difficult to argue with you because you've been on both sides, right? You've been on, you've been the commercial guy and you're now the VC, right? I do think, yes, basically other people would say what you just said is kind of an ICP focus. We need to know, who is our ideal customer profile, and then we're going to go after those and only those. And that helps us with marketing messaging, helps us with, sales processes, helps us with the right product, et cetera, et cetera. All of this is wonderful. Suddenly acquisition costs are going to go down, churn is going to go down, ACV is going to go up. Wonderful. But I feel kind of the reason why people are so undisciplined about this is simply because they're lead starved to a large degree, right? Kind of you get what you get, and then you try and squeeze whatever juice you get out of, you can out of what you get. And that then leads to this messy thing that is happening there, which I see more often than not is the practical reality. Wouldn't you, you between your commercial leadership days and your VC days, wouldn't you agree that that practicality thing here is driving this?
People will say in love, right? There's someone that your perfect partner is out there somewhere, and you need to go looking.
Yeah.
You'll find them in the end, right? If you're looking in the right way, and you get 100 leads, and your audience will appreciate the point that I'm about to make. But you get 100 leads, and you got to figure out, well, in there, is there a rich theme of gold, right? And is that rich theme of gold is the customers that are going to buy really quickly, that are going to get value from the purchase really quickly, right? That are going to rave about you, so your cost of actual acquisition goes down, right? And your earned media, and earned marketing kind of goes up, right? And the customers that stay around for a long period of time. Now, if at the same time you're selling to customers that basically are poor fit, then they're going to moan about you, right? Online. They're going to not last very long. So your CAC to LTV is going to be wrong. So your investor's going to think there's something wrong with you. So this stuff is super, super important. But what the way that you described it is the leads come in. So to me, that's kind of after the event of what's actually going on in the brain of the buyer. You need to really, really be obsessed about customer pain and what's going on with the buyer. And then you need people that are good at analyzing all of the data and the leads to say, okay, yeah, we've got 100 leads, but actually there's only 10 that are relevant. And this is the challenge between marketing and sales quite often. So sales have hit 50% of their number, and everyone's getting on pips and whatever you want to call them, and like people are going, there's only one guy that goes off and buys a new car, and everyone's in trouble with his wife or her husband. Meanwhile, marketing in the other room, they're like high-fiving. Woo, we've done 200 leads or whatever. Yeah, but they're 150 of the wrong leads that sales are forced to follow up, right? They're forced to follow up, which is a waste, an economic waste. So this thing is happening all the time. So you're either driving efficiency into your business with long-term value, or you're driving inefficiency into your organization, which has very short-term value. And so I think you have to think about it in economic terms. And it's really about being curious, asking the right questions and listening and so on and so forth. And you're trying to pick off. That's why I say you need like a VP of product market fit.
We shouldn't linger too long on this point, but to kind of, show the other side a little bit, I think pressure to grow with scarcity leads sometimes to, I need to do whatever with whatever I get, right?
It's the hardest thing.
And so I've been in those situations myself a few times, also understand whoever else is in that situation. If I was an investor, like it's super easy for me to be like, hey, in theory, guys, you're all stupid. You should just sign the customers that love you and that going to stay forever. And like, you should only do those. That's the asset I want you to acquire, right? I also want to move us along a little bit. So I think, one of the things you and I discussed kind of, before this to prep this a little bit is there's an ongoing, I think evolving thing now that the, let's just say, going the VC path for new folks building businesses is not the immediate first step for them to go, right? They maybe want to, go at it themselves, or maybe a small angel round or whatever it might be. And I think one really important, crucial piece here to understand for everyone is that not every business necessarily is a VC business, right? Like not every business is a business that should be backed by a loan by a bank, for example, right? Kind of they are kind of different features to a business that then lend themselves to being a VC case, basically. So really the question to you is, what is a VC case? Like, how can people, put this together and maybe overlay this to their own organizations right now to realize like, Are we a VC case to begin with? Are we not a VC case anymore? Should we be a VC case instead? I mean, kind of give people a little bit of a way to classify that, maybe.
It's such an important question because, again, in our sort of all of us, the investor, the founder, there's this kind of what we call this kind of delusional force field that we have, that we believe what we believe, and it's important that we need to believe what we believe in order to, like, lean forward and go in. As the founder is taking extraordinary risk with their time, and then they come to us, and we take a fractional amount of risk because we build a portfolio on them, and we all want it to work, right? But the reality is, from a VC, so staying on the venture track, which is growth driven, is let's say it's 1% of all of the VC deals that get done, parking all the other companies, right? So let's say there's 100% of companies. Not all 100% are pitching for VC type money or trading their equity for working capital, but let's say 10% of those that are pitching get VC money. But there's only going to be a tenth of those, 1%, that actually stay, broadly speaking, on the venture case. So venture is about growth, but if you then look at it as an ecosystem, if you are now not growing so fast, then we can say what is fast growing. Then the next place where you're going to build with your time, you're going to build a company and for an audience, and then you're going to exit that business either by IPO or you're going to have a trade sale, right? And so the next case that's not the VC case is the PE case, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's EBITDA driven, right? And then the only other two cases that you have left is the founder's case, which is I'm going to run a business that doesn't take outside equity finance, and I'm a master of my own destiny. Nothing wrong with that case. I actually love that case for many, many founders, right? And remember, I'm advising most founders to not take VC money, right? And then the fourth case is death, right? Is that you get that relationship between that quadrant wrong. So you think you're a high-growing company when you're not a high-growing company. So you therefore burn too much money and you lose your credibility. So the investors dry up, and you don't have enough time to move to the PE case where you would reduce your costs significantly and you would move to the PE case, right? The alternative is you're pre-revenue and maybe you've got something that's technically so incredible, then what you want, I call those a cheater, right? So you get a guy who's a product manager. He knows there's a gap that they can't afford on the roadmap. He goes and builds that product. And then he does it with very low levels of capital, and then he sells it into that industry for like $15 million, right? So pre-revenue businesses that are acqui-hire or tech hires, you can make a lot of money as a founder doing that. But you're being bought for technical reasons, right? There's a part of the machine that they don't have, that if they do have, they will become more competitive in their bigger scale. So, but the two main ones are VCs their catnip is growth. So, for example, if you're a 3x to 4x to 5x to 6x business at the beginning, when the VC writes the check, that's a VC case. As you start to get below 100% growth, you become less of a VC case, right? And then there's this critical moment in time, depending on how much capital you've got available on the balance sheet, is then you need to decide, if I'm not a VC case and I have this burn rate, at some point I am a PE case. So I need to reduce my cost. Now, what happens when you're a PE company? You're EBITDA driven. What you do is you milk your customers. So in other words, the cost of acquisition for growth doesn't make any sense. You've got 24-month payback, 36-month payback. Your CAC doesn't work. So it's better to basically, can all of the CAC and build on your customer base. If you can get profitable or cash flow break even doing that, then you as a founder will retain your equity and you can build a really great business. And maybe you can then flip that into PE. PE is going to be far more interested in you if they're not buying burn. So there's a number of factors that you can do. So you think of it like a quadrant, think of it like a model. Death is the one that you want to avoid. But for too long, it's that delusional force field where there's no evidence to suggest that you can be a high growth business, but you keep persisting to be a high growth business when you could pretty reasonably pivot to a no burn business and become more PE like, or just run it as a founder.
To translate this to some folks that are listening and maybe kind of got lost here. So to a large degree, right, kind of VC is about growth. If you want to achieve growth, you need to invest in it, right? Whether or not you have a great CAC of 12 months or a terrible CAC of more, 30 36 month or something like this, to a degree it matters, but it matters less because you get the growth for it, right? And then you can have the burn. But then there's the point of time where that, either, slips because you mess up, or it slips because you reach the end of the S curve and there's just not that much more market to take, right? At that point, you as a business need to think about like, okay, I can't afford all of that. You need to can the CAC, as you said. You need to reduce the amount of sales and marketing spend, basically, and kind of pivot towards a more profitable approach, which can only come from living predominantly off your customer base and then ideally trying to grow this in some shape or form, right? So if you're listening and you're a sales and marketing leader, make sure that you keep growing like crazy, because otherwise you're going to get canned, right? That's, kind of translating a little bit like this. But let's go one step further. Kind of we're on the track, kind of we're seeing kind of something is not working out. But you're as a VC, right? Kind of you're Series A, meaning there's usually some remnants of a product market fit already that you're seeing in the cases that you're working with. But what is it that, convinces you that something is on the growth track versus in the other quadrants, right? Because as operators of businesses need to figure out in which quadrant they are, you kind of need to do the same thing. You need to figure out in which quadrant are they actually in order then to even be viable to get a check from you guys.
Yeah, I think there's obviously hot sectors, and some of that hot sectors can create distortions in the market. For example, at the moment in the sort of AI window, you're going to get like just extraordinary levels of growth that will exist and we're predominantly the application layer for AI, right? That are extraordinary high growth. And but actually, when you kind of peel under the numbers, there's very little engagement underneath. So you have a lot of people, this problem with you see this with SMEs the whole time, right? They will pay to try your application. They have done for many years. And then when it doesn't work, they just stop paying you. And then if you try and, even if you've got a contract to try and get the 12 months money, they'll bitch about you on online, and then you sort of give up, right? You sort of, because all of a sudden, the market thinks you're a terrible app, which is not true, right? So what you're seeing at the moment is you're seeing a lot of AI companies growing really, really fast. But when you actually look under the numbers, the engagement, the usage is very, very low. And so there's a huge churn rate. So there's like a 15%, 20%, 25%, 30% month-on-month churn rate.
Crazy.
Right? So, but inside that, can that founder find that seam of gold where that's the AI business that they're going to build for this type of customer? So you've got to believe that the space is going to be, you're going to be able to build into and create an entirely new economic reality for an entire industry on this business, on the rails that this business is building. Are you going to become that category king? Is it going to become monopolist? You know the word I'm trying to say, a monopoly.
Yeah.
Yes. Is it a market that you think that there's going to be one alpha dog in that space, or do you think it's going to be a market of many? If it's a market of many, then obviously the TAM gets broken up into fragments, right? Whereas if you can build into something where they can really control much of that market, then economically that's going to create a much bigger business. So these are the things that you're thinking about the market. You're obviously thinking about the founder. That's sometimes one of the hardest things to do. Most of the mistakes that we all make as investors, is you're either backing the right founder that's in the wrong market, or you're backing the wrong founder in maybe the right market, and somebody else, competitively kind of takes that away. But it's obvious from a founder's perspective is if they can't drive an extremely high growth business, then they're not really a VC case. If they can build a high growth business that has high usage, retention, and then they can do land and expand. So that's, if you think about that economically, land and expand rather than land and churn, right? Then land and expand, you can build a much bigger business on less capital. And then ultimately, can they control much of that market? Because, we know statistically that the number one vendor in a market is controlling a significant percentage of that market. And there's no premium for being number three, right? There's some examples of where there is a premium for number two, and they'll duke it out for a number of years. We had 3 players in our market that duked it out over, 8 years. So those are the sort of things that we're thinking out. But growth is the catnip for an investor.
I want to go a little bit back to, so we have a very much like a, CEO founder conversation actually. And, it's also kind of important for sales and marketing ops leaders here on the call to kind of try and, learn about this area. That's why I have you on this thing, but also try and kind of, translate some of those things actually back, right? So we have talked a little bit about product market fit, right? Which usually is kind of connected to the first 0 to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 million of revenue, right? However, like product market fit is not you said like you want to have the VP product market fit indefinitely, basically forever in the business. Why is that, right? Why can't you fire that person after the first 5 million are achieved and everything is like a nail hammer operation?
Because markets are incredibly dynamic, right? They're extremely dynamic. And it's just not a static market. More today, for in the AI window, what's going to happen is the spikes are going to be higher, and they're going to end sooner, and then they're going to come down again. So we're just in this extraordinary place, which I think is so exciting, in many, many ways for all of the people on the call. I mean, you can see I'm an optimist, right? But like what is product market fit? Product market fit in simple terms is that you have something that has hit a resonating pain, which means cheaply you have got an unbelievable amount of demand that you cannot supply, right? So that you can't support those leads. It's just too much, right? And even in there, we've talked about the efficiency of figuring that out, right? And then that's when you get product market fit at the beginning. That's when, from an investor perspective, forget series, pre-seed, seed. There's before product market fit and there's after product market fit.
Yeah.
And then after product market fit is highly repeatable scale. So there's lots of companies that get to product market fit that don't get to highly repeatable scale. Your audience knows this 100%. They will have all worked for a company that's got product market fit. They've got to highly repeatable scale. They're either part of that journey or they joined at some different stage. And then their business evolved, post highly repeatable scale into sort of multiple products, multiple markets, right? Each of those multiple products, multiple markets is a product market fit, right? And so all of a sudden you're either adding something that's just a little bit additive, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's an awesome strategy. Or your VP of product market fit finds some extraordinary adjacent pain that is driving a type of buyer that's within their audience or within their customer base. That is the thing that will move the business into an incredible new trajectory, right? That just doesn't add a little bit of growth. It doesn't add 10% to your growth. It doesn't add 10% to your win rate, right? You could build an entirely new company on that feature. I'll give you an example. We launched a product. This is what creative MessageLabs. We launched a product and the feature was a free feature in a bundle. But when we switched the alpha on, we were going live, we had the alpha, we were doing the beta, we were getting ready for general availability. We switched the alpha on, and we were basically seeing how much malicious bad stuff was in email. This is back in '98, and we had a bell on this thing. So the techies switched it on in the data center. We moved some customers' email traffic. We put it through this tech stack. And they decided for some reason that every time it caught something that was bad, a bell would go off. And this screech emitted out of the TV as we're all involved in this demo. And we didn't know what was going on. We're like, what the hell's happening? And they were like, oh my God, it's the bell. So what it did is it told us there's a lot of bad stuff in email. And so we realized immediately we'd hit internet gold, right? We just thought, holy crap, we need to really start to think about this free feature that we've designed into this product, into the marketing services description is a killer. So that then meant that we created an entirely new company, which is MessageLabs, and it became 150 million subscription business in 8 years, right? So your VP of product market fit's job is to find gold, right? Wherever it is within your market definition, within your buyer, your different categories, whether it's in Europe or the US, or whether it's this adjacent buyer in the organization that's got a similar problem that you can launch within your product that addresses their pain. And product market fit for that new launch is extraordinary levels of demand that doesn't cost that much, right? So I think about it like that. It's this sort of like this miner hat with a torch on it who spends all their time in the dark looking for gold.
So that role usually doesn't exist, right? And that role usually is being taken on by one or more of the co-founders, I would say. I think reaching product market fit is, someone described it as like finally being able to sleep again as a founder, right? Kind of there's a lot of emotional strain connected to this PMF thing, right? Now, what you just described is that product market fit might slip away. Like, you might be at 20 million and suddenly you don't actually have that anymore. Maybe you had a really strong pull in the beginning, but maybe it's not there anymore for whatever reason. And the people that will notice this the most are the people in the front lines, right? It might be people on the show you're listening right now. Kind of, I'm experiencing this. This is not as it used to be, or like there's more competition. The product is buggy. We went into this. We went into enterprise and it's not working. We went to the US and it's not working. How should they address this with the founding team or the CEO? Because it's a little bit like going to your boss and saying, "Hey, your baby is ugly." Like, how do you best address that and kind of bring this up and move this in a constructive direction?
Send them this podcast. Seriously,
that's right.
Seriously,
there you go.
We're all so invested in wanting our future self this quarter. Let's say it's a sales leader this quarter, the founder. Board meeting to board meeting this year. We're so invested in wanting it, like you said, the belief. We're so invested in wanting to see all the lights go green, all the arrows to go in the right direction. We're so invested in that we lose track of ourselves. I think you can get incredibly bright, relatively cheap people, whose job is to go out mining information, looking for seams of gold. That's the job description is so simple, and it needs to be semi-permanent. I mean, I will be on a board meeting. I will have been on a board meeting. I will be on a board meeting again where there is 50, 60, 70 million invested in the company. And you hear the thing that you never want to hear, but you do hear, which is like, the founder says, "I don't think we've got product market fit." At that point, your investment case, gone, right? Because we all know that, yes, we're in there for like that turnaround mode, right? Intellectually, we have to turn the business around. Even when you've intellectually turned it around, so you feel like you've now found the thesis for product market fit and all this burn is going out. You then still got to hire the team and, reconfigure the product, and you then still got to build the company. So, and in those cases when quite often they end badly, there's, 50, 100 million written off, effectively the senior members of the team and the board and the investors, they've spent 50 to 100 million on an MBA. That's what they've spent, right? They've spent it on, the only way you can justify it is like, we've learned a lot and we're going to, from those learnings but there's no other way to justify what just happened, right? And obviously in the window that we're in at the moment, there's going to be a lot of those, right?
Tagging on to this line of thought, actually, some VC cases stop to be VC cases. For example, here, right? Kind of, you were in this board meeting, they say we don't have product market fit, actually. Oops. That suddenly is going to be really difficult for anyone to try and operate this business as it was a VC business, right? And a very Machiavellian way to sometimes think about the VC and business relationship is like, oh, okay, I'm actually not. You can't be a fund returner to me. You can't be a unicorn. You can't, go 1,000x my investment. I'm kind of less interested in you guys now, right? Kind of, that's a very Machiavellian way to kind of think about it. I don't think that's how the reality actually works out. But the question here is like, you and maybe you've been a chairman of a board, maybe you've kind of been the go-to guy as a VC for the founder. Like, how do you have that conversation, or maybe you don't, or maybe it's kind of an implicit thing of like, hey, maybe this is just not, maybe this VC path has kind of ended here, and you need to change gears right the fuck now.
Look, no one around the table wants to lose all their money. The founders don't. The investors don't. The senior leadership don't want a zero valued ethos, right?
Yeah.
So you've all got the same information. You're all simulating it in a certain kind of way. And I just go back to that model, which is, look, if we don't have a high growth case, then there won't be pools of capital that will invest in this business, which then moves it to the PE case. The great thing about the PE case is, that they're EBITDA driven. So it's like, you get this situation where the founder is an innovator and wants to keep investing money in innovating and culture. And I'm not saying don't invest in culture, right? And all of this extra stuff. And in a PE case, that wouldn't happen, right?
Yeah.
Well, in a PE case, it's EBITDA driven. So what they will do is they will say, like, they will get really granular about their customers, and they will say, okay, we've got 100 customers, and if in 5 years' time we've only got 110 customers, right? We need to work out how do we get 3 times more money out of those 100 customers, right? Now, let me give you an example of a business that is like this, that makes a fortune, right? The biggest law firms, right?
Yeah.
They're not doubling their customer size, right? They have incredibly client intimate relationships where they're picking off increasingly bigger needs that those customers have that they solve. If you have 100 customers and you're burning money and you don't have a growth case, then you need to get really deep in with those 100 customers. Now, let's just play this forward. We'll just play a little game. So you now really, really understand your customers. You're spending virtually no money on cost of acquisition. You're now unpicking all of the adjacent needs that sit around your technology, your proposition for these customers, and you start to build around those customers. Do you think those customers are going to love you more or love you less? I think they love you more, and I think they'll tell their friends about you loving you more. Now, you might only grow at 30%, but that is the perfect PE case. So you think about cash flow, you think about rule of 40, you think of revenue employee, you think of the average order value per customer, you think about the modules that you can wrap around your existing. We're not talking about CAC and sales and marketing in the traditional growth sense. We're talking about the focus of the business is different. It's just an extraordinary. This is most businesses. What I'm talking about is most businesses. So there is. I've seen some of my favorite founders just make that pivot, and just do extraordinarily well.
Yes, I think it's difficult to execute. I think going from growth in not at all costs, but being a growth business to being a profit-driven business, very hurtful, culture changes, all of that stuff, really difficult to execute. I also think there is some, math problem in the cap table that you'll need to navigate. People have invested for big multiples that were based on growth targets that are not kind of being achieved, etc. But I wanted to get your take on one last bonus question that I have here, which is a little bit away from that stuff. And, I recently did a piece on 1 out of 4 executives in Pavilion are sitting on the bench, not actually being able to find a job. And that has to do, obviously, with the boom and bust that happened in the early 2020s. And it wasn't only VCs and founders that lost a lot of money, it was also those careers that got shredded to a degree. You and I had a fun conversation about this. I just wanted to kind of get your take on the record here on, what is it you think that, with all this vibe coding, vibe marketing, and kind of all those execs kind of sitting around, what do you think might actually happen with that?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I thought it was a brilliant piece of content. So, well done, Pavilion. Fantastic. I thought your take on it was fantastic. So if you take the more recent past, there might be 6,000 startups that VCs are processing, right? So depending on the region, it might be 2,000-3,000 per region. Mm-hmm. And we're looking for those needles in a haystack. And if you're involved in those businesses, you're going to have, let's say, at a macro level, you'll have like maybe 500,000 product managers. I make the number up, right? Let's say you've got 4.5 million engineers, right? And you've got a VP sales saying, look, if we don't have this feature, our win rate's going down. We're struggling to penetrate this. And they come to the VC and it's like, oh, we need more money in order to buy more engineers and get more products and stuff like that. So that's the world that we've been in. That's the world that we know. But now you can spin up an app this 2 hours. Like I've got a 60-year-old guy who's just literally come out of retirement who just he's a product CEO. He just loves the fact that he has all this technology to hand because he doesn't have to worry about what I just said, right? He's been stifled by the slow nature of innovation. And so what are we going to have now? We're going to have what, like 60,000 apps a month come onto the market?
Yeah.
So we go from 6,000, you know, are they viable, are they not viable applications, to, you know, 6,000 a month, 6,000 a week, 6,000 a day. So this is extraordinary. I mean, and of course, there's a certain type of person at the moment that's like, you know, vibe coding, it's amazing because there is, you know, I come from this like, you know, really underprivileged, poor background. And so I see for that audience, this is liberation, right? This is financial liberation in order to create a product very, very cheaply and put it into market and then, you know, generate revenue from that. That's super exciting. But if you fast forward and you've got all of this choice, what's it like for buyers, right? Well, for buyers, there's an overwhelming amount of choice. And so the big problem will become monetization, and the big problem will become go to market. And so actually it'll swing back to sort of like, you know, the really bright, smartest people in go to market, whether they are that founder, so they build that app, you know, they take that to market, they figure out the market side, the distribution side of an app is still super hard. Or whether they pair up with you know, product guy or an engineer, and you know, they do this together. I think it's interesting. But products in the next 2 years will become like content.
Yeah,
just an overwhelming amount of content coming at buyers who then like are like overwhelmed and confused, and you know, and so the sort of the go-to-market smarts and the pricing, packaging, value proposition, you know, all of those things will, you know, spike back up as being important.
So I think this is a fantastic take. And just to kind of bring it back to full reality, and, you know, we're kind of short on time here, but you and I chatted about this. I actually kind of, you know, wrote some of the piece also with one of my friends in mind that is kind of experiencing this really strong go-to-market leader, having issues actually finding a job, like, you know, been struggling with that actually. And then you and I had the conversation, I chatted with him again, and you know what? Turns out he actually has now a Lovable account. He built a product. He's going out telling people that he's kind of building this thing. He's checking this out. I advised him, you know, should this be a VC case? Should it not? So this is not just theoretical stuff we're discussing here. This is actually what's happening in the market right now. People are using those skills, those tools in order to replace the skills that they didn't have, and marrying this up with their go-to-market smarts. I think this is absolutely fantastic. I'm looking forward to this time. Chris, thank you so much for spending the time here and educating our folks here listening.
Just on that, it's just so funny. One of my guys just launched a diagnostic tool for me. So it's like Chris it's not called Chris GPT, but it's my entire investing career. It's 20,000 decks. It's all of my content into a very specific GPT that you can just dump your deck in it, and it will give you extremely pithy feedback. Right? Do you know how extraordinary that is compared to the past? This thing is better than me, because once you get the report, you know, it's organized for me. I have a you know, a disruptive mind. It's, you know, it's chaotic. So so that GPT plus me plus the founder is just so much better and far more efficient, right? I could do 100 deck hacks an hour, whereas it took me 100 deck hacks took me over 2 years to do that. Like giving feedback to founders around their deck, right? So we're just an extraordinary way. And just one last point on the professional services side, right? The software is professional services and industry is over 100 times bigger than software. 100 times bigger. And that is going to get digitalized. It's like a new mega trend that is going to get digitalized. So for, like, you know, for people listening to this, you know, there's just an extraordinary opportunity for you in technology. And, you know, you know, you can build huge amounts of financial independence if you sort of get on the ride.
How can people find this GPT you just mentioned? Is that something you kind of publicized, or is that a secret one?
It's still in stealth, but yeah, it is around. It is live. If they DM me on LinkedIn, I'll send them a link, and
DM Chris.
yeah,
Yes.
just do that, and or comment on something that I put on LinkedIn. You know, I get this ridiculous amount of impressions on LinkedIn, like 60 million impressions a year or something, and it's the easiest way to find me. Or on my Substack, the Founders Corner.
It's also recommended on my Substack, so you can find it through that. Chris, thank you so much for spending the time. This was really fun, and I think it was not only entertaining but also educating. Kind of the sweet spot we're trying to kind of hit here. And yeah, I hope everyone took something away, something tangible at least, kind of for their day to day. And otherwise, Chris, thanks a bunch.
Thanks for inviting me, Tony. I really enjoyed it. And yeah, good luck out there, everyone.
Next week, Roland and I are talking about pricing. Everyone is scared of touching it. Every consultant is telling you to change it and tweak it all the time. But what is our experience from pricing changes that drove literally millions of dollars of revenue? And most importantly, what is it we would have liked to know before we did that? If you don't want to miss it, hit subscribe and see you next week.
If you can change pricing in the right way, it can be one of the most cost-effective things you can do all quarter long. But if you invest time and make the right pricing changes, you could make so much money just with that.
People are quite afraid to make a step there, which is why a lot of successful pricing projects I've seen had to come from the CEO, because the CEO was the one who was like, okay, nobody's going to fire me. Either the board is going to ask me to step down, but at least I know that if it's not me, nobody else is going to touch this.
We basically took every one subscription and increased it by 5% or something like that. We were at 20 million, and then, that 5% jump made a lot of money. While this was a dumb change that got a lot of money, if we had invested a lot more time instead of just increasing prices, but actually repackaging, putting way more thought in this, and maybe even in some areas pushing the price even further up, I think there would have been a 10-15% hike in there.